Welcome back to the Intelligent Builder podcast, sponsored by Plutus Agents. Today, I'm joined by Ben Lagrange, the co-founder of AirGuard. Ben and his co-founder Chris came into residential HVAC as career engineers, then kept running to the same problem. Mold was showing up in crawl spaces and duct systems, often discovered late and handled reactively. So over a couple of years, they started building and training a sensor to detect the chemical off-gassing signatures tied to mold, and AirGuard was born. So it was first sold through their HVAC businesses in North and South Carolina and a small set of affiliates. So we'll be chatting about that today. And Ben, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Owen.
Yeah, no, of course. So I'd love to start kind of at the beginning, right? So you were an engineer, then you hopped into residential HVAC. So why residential HVAC in the first place?
So the other owner, Chris, and I, we were in a power generation provider, manufacturer, and the power generation market's cyclical, kind of like everything is, but the cycles are very long. The boom cycles could be a few years, and the bus cycles, the hard cycles could be a few years, and typically lags the general economy by a few years. So like right now, they're in a very boom cycle driven by the rise of AI and the data centers and all that stuff. But back then, at that time, we were in a difficult cycle, and our company had made some decisions that put a lot of pressure on cost and cash flow, and it was like multiple layoff cycles, right? So Chris and I were looking at other things to do. We thought we have a little more control of our destiny, and we kind of landed on residential heating and air. We're in South Carolina. We say, hey, demand's going to be there. People will fix their air conditioner before they buy groceries in the summertime. And so, yeah, there is robust demand. And so we decided on that. We ended up finding a company in North Carolina, in Brevard, that the owner was retiring. And we bought that company. And then we both live down in South Carolina in Greer, which is a little over an hour away from that office. And so about a year and a half later, opened up from scratch, basically this office in Greenville, South Carolina. So we have those two offices now. We've been running collectively about 6 years now.
That's awesome. You're able to buy the business and expand that quickly. Through your time in the field, you were seeing mold in those places where you don't really want to see mold all the time. So was there a moment where you realized like this isn't just a service issue, it can be a product? Like how was AirGuard kind of formalized into what it is today?
Well, yes, so I mentioned the demand for HVAC. It is pretty solid, but it is very seasonal within the year, right? And so about 4 years ago, we added duct cleaning, mainly to give our installers good work to do. That's also beneficial to homeowners in the spring and the fall when demand service isn't so strong. And in that, as you referenced, we encountered a lot of mold, right? A lot of mold in the duct systems themselves, in the indoor units, in the crawl spaces, oftentimes in the home around the supply vents and things like that. And then about the time so a lot of the duct cleaning requests would end up turning into duct replacement requests once we showed the homeowner what was going on inside their system. And about that time, Chris had a neighbor in his subdivision that had a very bad encounter with mold. It had gotten all under the subfloor in the house, and the two children at that house evidently were very sensitive to mold. So roughly 10% of the population has a sensitivity to mold. And they had to move out of the house, had like $100,000 remediation project going on. They were out of the house over 6 months. And those children had, I don't know if they're lifelong, but at least long-term health implications from that mold that was in their house. The ability to help people from the health standpoint, as well as, what we were seeing on the business side with having to deal with all this mold. Chris had a history with some sensor development really right as he was exiting college at the University of Florida, and started playing around with a sensor that's off the shelf that can be trained with AI models to recognize chemical signatures. And so that kind of led to where we are now, where we have this device that utilizes the sensor and can pick up and identify, species of mold.
Okay, yeah, that's super cool. I mean that is a terrible story though, but it sparked this kind of idea to really help people in that way. So what was the first couple of years. It was a couple years, right, of building and testing. So what was that process like?
Well, we did a proof of concept that we could detect odors, right? Because the same chemical signatures, sometimes you can smell them. Like it could be a smelly closet at your house or a pantry that's got something in it. So we kind of did the proof of concept on that, something very simple and readily available. And then um, the city of Greer, and now it's part of the chamber, there was an initiative called the Platform at Greer, which was small business support. And they have 2 or 3 boot camps every year. And so we had learned about one of their boot camps in the spring of 2024. Signed up to go to this boot camp really with the mission of determining, was there going to be a market for this thing? And in that boot camp, we were able to talk to people that were in mold remediation companies, people that had commercial facilities, warehouses on their campus. I forget who all else. There's a number of different types of, also doctors, I think, to look at the health side of things. And they also had some legal support too. So we looked at the patentability of this, right? And so coming out of that, it was like, yes, we definitely think there's a market. And so then we started moving from that prototype to like an MVP one type of product that we could pilot in people's homes. And we had a list of interested people coming out of that boot camp that we piloted in their homes immediately. And then since we have a residential HVAC company, we had a lot of customers we could reach out to who's interested in being a pilot customer. And we've kind of transitioned from those pilots to now it's a product that's included in a service agreement, or they can buy it if they want it.
So that boot camp was really, really helpful then. It really kind of jump started what you were doing and it validated your plan. And then, like you said, you started selling it through your company in the Carolinas. So you also tried to, or you did kind of get into affiliates, right? The mold inspectors and indoor environmental pros, things like that. So how did that work? Why did you kind of go that route first?
We kind of bumped into them. So there's a surprisingly large number of mold groups, whether they're health focused or home focused or whatever, on Facebook. And so I joined those groups and just kind of laid low for a while, not trying to, like, I'm the expert, because what you learn is kind of like anything. If someone gets a disease or they go into adoption, or there's all these like subcultures that there's a ton of information. There's experts on a particular topic because they've had to dive in deep to figure out how to deal with it, because help is not readily available, right? There's nowhere you can go and say, here's what you do. And so, I was there mainly to learn, what are people complaining about? What are they looking for? Where are they looking for help? And what I started doing was, if I could see there was someone who is struggling with mold in their home, or thought they had it remediated but were still having health issues, I would just kind of put a gentle nudge of a comment on their post saying, hey, here's a device we've developed that might be able to help you. Contact me if you'd like to discuss it more, or look at this website. And that got the attention of some people that are in the profession, some mold experts, indoor environmental professionals, and so forth. Had a few of those reach out and want to have conversations. And so that kind of turned into this advisory board group, affiliate group, that, where they have potential to use it either as part of how they meet the customer's needs in their business, or maybe sell it to a customer. And along the way, give us feedback on, here's what works well, here's what doesn't work so well. Here's, just give us feedback on the product, right?
Hey, that's great. Those Facebook groups are still now super helpful. Just, I mean, in that way of, you know, gaining some clientele, but also just for knowledge, to gain knowledge on your business, how people are thinking about what you're trying to sell. So that was super key, and it got you to find some affiliates there. What's maybe your dream, like, kind of distribution long term? I mean, I know before this we were talking about you kind of switching lanes into something else, but is that, direct to homeowner, partners, builders? What's the dream there?
Well, we think there's strong potential in 2 channels. One is the affiliate network, like I mentioned before. In their case, it'd be more in helping the homeowner solve their mold problem in their home or with their health. The other channel would be through partner contractors. And that could, I think the more practical way to go through that is through distributors that are already selling to contractors like us. And, I mentioned earlier about how the reason we went into duct cleaning during the shoulder seasons, most heating and air companies also put some effort into when they're in the customers' homes at those times of year when there are a lot of pollen in the air, especially here in South Carolina. The discussion naturally comes up about allergies and advanced filtration and other things that can help with indoor air quality. And those are things that when the customer needs them and wants them, those are good ways to help the heating and air business during those shoulder seasons. And so our thought was for heating and air companies or other companies that focus on air quality, that getting these devices in homes, either permanently or on a temporary basis, can kind of reveal to that homeowner, hey, it might be worth me spending some money on indoor air quality devices, air purifiers, whatever, because this is showing me I have an issue in my house, right? So in those cases, it was really more of a pull through of other indoor air quality products from a business standpoint was the idea. Not necessarily that an HVAC company is going to, increase their revenue tremendously just on the sale of an AirGuard sensor.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I've got like 3 kind of air purifiers around my house. I have one right here next to me now. So yeah, things like that going through a distribution or a distributor channel, I can see how that makes a lot of sense.
I think the dream thing would be, though, because the device itself isn't big or super complicated for us to install or anything. It's just a matter of getting it there. And the dream would be for like an HVAC manufacturer that also makes the indoor air quality products to put it in the unit itself. So like in the cabinet of a heat pump, right? So all of the air going through the house is going to go right by it because we install them in the or in the return plenums with the same thought. So if the HVAC unit comes from the factory with it already in there, and you can tie the display into the thermostat or into the app, which most smart thermostats have an app now, so it'd be very simple to integrate ours into that. It would naturally reveal to the homeowner then, hey, there's other things you may want to consider, which would benefit the factory as well if the customer decided to move forward with that. So that would be probably the dream on the home services side of things. Just have a ways to go to get there, I think.
Yeah, that makes too much sense for it not to happen. So how are you planning to get there? Like what's the path you want to take?
Well, I think to get the attention of an OEM is with some traction on our own sales, right? So we're kind of doubling down our efforts on integrating it into how we do business at our own companies. And I've had some interest from some other contractors. Actually, very recently, we had a home show here in Greenville this past weekend, and there was a general manager from another heating and air company that stopped by our booth, and all he wanted to talk about was AirGuard, right? And he was going to go take it back to his VP or something, and they may call back. We'll see. But we have some contacts through the supply chain to maybe make some headway, but I think the best way is to get our own traction. You can take that to someone else that has more skin in the game and say, hey, for this amount of investment, this is what it could do for you. Based off what
Yeah,
we
no,
see.
that makes sense. Yeah, you got to really kind of show the value first. I know this maintenance company, they've been growing really fast. They clean heat ducts, air ducts and stuff like that. Is that a kind of affiliate that you'd be looking for? So like those that kind of do that kind of maintenance or more of the contractors themselves?
Probably the contractors, because those guys don't sell or install the equipment. I guess some of them may do that, but like to my knowledge, the companies that focus on duct cleaning don't replace ducts. So I mean, it's kind of a different model, if you will.
Yeah, no, I see that. Yeah. And so you're really learning a lot through selling it in your own company. I remember you said there's 3 types of homeowners, right? So the ones who don't care, the ones who are worried but don't want to know, and the ones who should have had it gone yesterday. It was something like that, right? So how does that change how you sell or the message or even design the product?
Well, that's part of the challenge so those 3 groups was like the type that doesn't want to know. So I don't want to tell anyone when I'm selling my house that I ever had a mold problem. And then there's the kind that are kind of indifferent about it. And then there's the folks that want to know, and if they have it, they want it gone yesterday. And that last group is the one that is going to feel the pain of having mold in their house. Those are the ones you want to reach. That's where those Facebook groups, that's where those people live. And the challenge for us as Blue Ridge Heating and Air is most of the members of those Facebook groups are not in our service area. And so trying to reach them by just getting them to buy an AirGuard over the internet and we ship it to them. We've done some of that. It's harder to execute that model. And we've actually, I think since last time we talked, we've started a network of, let's say, remediators, where people can sign up. So if you're a remediation company in, say, Kansas City, and if there's a homeowner that has an AirGuard in your area and it alerts, because this was kind of the issue, right? If it alerts, what does the customer do, right? Because Blue Ridge can't help you. We're 1,000 miles away, right? So basically to develop a network of people that can respond to a customer's concern as a result of an alert from AirGuard. And so that's fairly new. We've had a few sign up for that, but that's just kind of another way to get that whole model going forward.
That's really smart. It's another kind of tentacle out there you have to get AirGuard out there. What's an example of the kind of gone yesterday group? What are some signs to really watch out for?
Typically, they have had a bad experience with it before, or they know someone that's had a very bad experience. Like the pain and the consequences of the problem, they've felt it directly or felt the fallout from it, and they don't want anything to do with it. And I had someone call me a few months ago, a woman here in Greenville whose daughter had an issue with mold and mold toxicity. And there was a chiropractor that figured out that that's what it was. And she was very skeptical and then went to their primary care and had some blood work done. And sure enough, there was mold toxicity in her system. And she lost like 15 pounds, and it took this is a teenage girl, right? And it took several months for it to kind of purge itself of her system. Well, then a year later, she got it again, and they realized it was from the dorms at the summer camp she was going to, right? And that's pretty common. My own daughter came home from a summer camp 2 years in a row, kind of feeling a little bit sickly. And we were thinking, because she saw some stuff that like mold in a dorm she was in. So those kind of community living places where it's barracks, dorms, assisted livings are all kind of prone to that thing. But anyway, someone like that who has a family member that's gone through it, they're more interested in making sure that the problem's not going to sneak up on us, because that's what happens, right? It sneaks up, and by the time you know about it, because either your house has visible damage or your health has visible damage, it's gotten pretty bad.
Yeah, that's awful. So it's really those that have just had personal experience or know somebody that have experienced the mold. In terms of, so when AirGuards in a home sends alerts, right? It has alarms. So how do you kind of navigate between like balancing helpful alerts versus like terrifying alarms? Is there a different type? Like mold is starting or mold is really bad?
So there's two things it does. One is it looks at, and this is not all that unique to AirGuard, but it looks at temperature and humidity and says, given these conditions, what's the likelihood that mold will grow in this environment? And that's like green, there's no risk, yellow, which probably means within a couple months. And then red means it could be within a couple days, right? So that's like the risk piece of it. But the more novel piece of AirGuard is the ability to detect the presence of mold. And we've kind of learned, some of our pilot and even our first MVP customers, if you will, we kind of learned how to set the right frequency of alerts, and that the device does some things like when you first configure it or provision it at someone's home, it takes a while to stabilize. And so we've done some things on the back end to kind of filter out things that might be false alarms, or, if for some reason conditions spike, and so it's at a mold conducive condition for 5 minutes and then it damps back out, to not alert that, right? Because we don't want to send alerts and then someone goes and opens the app and like, I don't see anything here, what's the problem? So try to put a time element into things. Okay, if it's staying in a condition for several hours or over a day, okay, it's not that someone just opened a window for a few minutes or opened a door and let a bunch of humidity in or let mold spores come in, which happens, right? And we could actually see that real time we could see, because we have ability to look at trend lines, and we would see spikes and things, and then we talk to that customer, and turns out, oh yeah, I had the window open. Trying to learn, not to, have people get alarmed over what's considered like normal activities. So that's what a lot of stuff we've learned. This is the kind of things we continue to learn from the customers that we have. And those type of instances get less as we go forward. We had we weren't seeing this as a problem, but one of the concerns that was raised from the mold expert community was how our detecting ability being masked by household chemicals. So like if someone sprays perfume or hairspray or mop the floors or whatever, because if someone comes into a house to do a VOC test, which we can do that now, you typically tell that homeowner, hey, don't do any of these things in that area for roughly 24 hours prior to us being there, because we don't want that to confound the results. And so we actually bought an environmental chamber that we have in our warehouse here at Blue Ridge. It's a smaller one. It's like a large microwave, but you can independently control temperature and humidity. And we put a bunch of these different types of chemicals in there and kind of ran tests to show that those things do indeed produce a chemical signature, but it is differentiated from what we see for mold, right? So we're in the process of documenting some of this stuff for publication to say, okay, yes, these are valid concerns, but we've demonstrated through experiments that the chemical signatures are unique, and you can differentiate between what's a harmful mold and what's, your Febreze that you just sprayed in your house, right?
Yeah, that's super cool. You're able to continuously test that too, and you've found the ways to mitigate the false alarms, right? So that's great. You were able to do that within your own company too. There was before this, before we hit record, we were talking about how maybe it was our last conversation actually, where HVAC techs, they're kind of trained not to say the word mold because it can be like super alarming to people. So how how do you train your techs to kind of navigate a conversation like that? Or how did you before AirGuard was really a thing?
I mean, it's interesting. Even the microbial lab that one of the mold experts here in town we use that sends his air samples to, we talked to the owner there, who's like a master's degree and very qualified. We kind of asked, what are thresholds for mold spore counts or whatever that, health becomes a concern or whatever. We couldn't get clear answers, right? There's like so much legal sensitivity around it that I think hospitals have some clear distinctions for that, but people don't want to talk about it. And in our industry, and it wasn't, we were relatively new to this industry. So this behavior we've kind of learned from training classes we've gone to and the people that sell IAQ stuff to us to call it, biological growth and things like that, not call it mold, right? And so, yes, that's a big headwind when you talk about this guy that's grown up in the industry not talking about mold directly to now say, hey, we have this mold sensor, mold detector. It creates skepticism, and then it creates a lot of questions that people really don't want to get into. And so there's an educational hurdle to selling this. And it happens first, with an owner or with a GM of a company, and then it happens with the technicians that are the ones in the home or the comfort specialists that are in the home that are talking to homeowners about it. But what I've seen is the kind of thing that if you're not talking to that 10% of the population that's really concerned about it, it probably doesn't go anywhere. And that 10% of the population already knows something about it, right? So the educational wall is much lower. You really just have to tell them, what this thing can do and can't do, and then they get it relatively quickly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I can see how there's definitely a pretty steep learning curve there, especially if, you're a 40, 50-year-old guy that's been in the industry your whole life. I mean, it's going to be tough to kind of switch the way you speak about mold. But let's say there's an HVAC owner or GM, like you were saying, kind of listening. What's the simplest way you tell them to teach their techs about mold or teach them to talk about mold without creating chaos?
I think, like for us, we've have a high degree of confidence in this mold and AirGuard and its abilities. But even when it does alert consistently, hey, we're detecting mold, we're going to tell that homeowner before you go ripping out duct systems or tearing into walls, trying to find it, whatever it is, and this is kind of why we developed are trying to develop that network. We're going to recommend you hire a qualified mold inspector to come test and find it. And this doesn't directly answer your question, but a hard thing is you could have 10 different mold experts, and probably you're lucky if 3 of them agree on what's the best way to find it and test for mold, right? There's just a very wide degree of opinions on it. And most of their opinions are based on their own anecdotal facts of how they've done things and what they've seen. So you can't invalidate what they're saying because they have experience with it, but they're very much biased towards their opinions and belief. So that makes it harder because there's not very clear standards on things. So, but I think we're not trying to portray ourselves, and we don't want the technician to portray himself as a mold expert. It's more of like the smoke alarm for your house, right? It's going to tell you if you have a mold growth concern based on the environment, or you have mold present that you may want to get addressed. And, a lot of people, when their smoke alarm is beeping, they take the batteries out, right? And a lot of people go find where the smoke's coming from. And a lot of times it's the oven in the kitchen, and then they're kind of trained to ignore it unless they're not cooking, right? So it's kind of the same. You got to create an analogous story of like the smoke or fire detector. It's a similar type of purpose, right? It's not 100%, but it's going to be a leading indicator to tell you, hey, there's something you should pay attention to here. Dig a little deeper into it, and you may have a real problem. You may not have a real problem. And kind of not make it this alarmist conversation that, because you don't want to do that, one, for the folks that are going to get very alarmed, maybe unnecessarily, and the other for the folks that feel like you're trying to make them alarmed when they don't need to. We don't want to ever be selling it to the customer. We want to be presenting it as an option, and if they want to buy it, they can buy it from us.
That right there is super difficult to navigate too. Not trying to come off as super salesy, but just genuinely helpful. So yeah, keeping it simple when you're explaining and kind of familiarize it, like comparing it to the smoke detector, like you did, because that can be tough, especially nowadays. There's not a lot of trust in
That's right.
people. Yeah. So let's zoom out a little bit. I want to know what you think has to happen over the next 12 months for you to look back and be like, oh, AirGuard really kind of broke through this year. What has to happen?
I mean, what would be ideal for us is if we had, I'd say 3 distributors on board that, or maybe we've also talked about using factory sales reps to help get that momentum moving forward and get more traction with sales, right? We'd like to have, the volume, have, let's say, 500 to 1,000 units out there, which now is probably around 100.
Any goals around more affiliates or partnering with, HVAC or builders? Oh yeah, you're kind of switching lanes, right?
Yeah, not. You want to talk about the switching lanes a little bit or no?
Yeah, I mentioned it. Yeah, talk about it.
Okay. All right. So what I told Owen before we started is we went to a conference in Georgia for pest control, because a lot of pest control companies do crawl space encapsulation, and this is a good product to help a customer realize they probably should do that or not do it, right? And we ended up talking to a guy at a chemical company that sells into the agriculture space, and he said that his company helps a lot of facilities that store grain on farms, and those facilities have a problem with losses due to mold. And it could be the loss due to the mold, or it could be an operational cost for excessive spraying to prevent, or not spraying, but running air through the system, or from the pest control standpoint, excessive spraying to prevent losses. And so we have some tests going on right now in a lab, a USDA lab, to kind of prove that this concept will work for grain. And so we just got back from a conference. So we're kind of spending some energy rooting out that vertical, if you will, to say, does that have legs, and are they bigger legs than what we're seeing on the home services side? So we're going to keep pushing things strong with our own company, Blue Ridge Heating and Air. And as we get more traction and word of mouth, and through, I'm hoping our own distributors that we buy equipment from will see the uptick in indoor air quality stuff that we're buying, and we can, that's the most logical place, is to get the distributors that we already buy from to get on board with AirGuard.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. We'll keep that as a kind of sneak peek into a potential vertical for AirGuard coming soon. But I want to ask you one more question, kind of more on the home services side of the business. So we spoke a little bit about kind of healthy homes and how it's really an up and coming subject and topic now, not only in construction, but just in building contracting in general. So do you think that's gonna stay more niche, or do you think things like AirGuard are gonna become like the smoke detector soon? There's gonna be things in the home that can really help with the sustainability and health of humans in general. What do you think about that in the coming years?
I mean, I don't know how fast it will happen, but yeah, I think things are trending in that direction. I mean, there's a lot more. I mean, if you look on Amazon, right, how many thousand different air purifiers are there out there, right? And it's probably, 100x what it was 15 years ago, right? So I think there's a lot of consumer activity in that space. And so I think you'll see more movement there. I mean, there's inside the homes, the idea of putting ERVs, energy recovery ventilation systems on homes is growing. Fresh air systems into homes is growing. So there's the outdoor air quality in general is so much better than the indoor air quality, and people are wanting a way to bring that outdoor air in, but condition it some on the way in, or put products in the home that bring the indoor air quality up to the outdoor air standard, right? So I think it's going to keep going in that direction. And there's more and more companies, popping up routinely on indoor air quality. There's several national organizations around indoor air quality that are out there lobbying for things. So I think you'll see it come into more building code stuff. Right now, that's state by state. Some folks in that space think that fresh air should be a requirement on residential homes, but like the home builders lobbies don't want to do it because it increases the cost of the homes. Houses are built pretty tight today, right? And especially with spray foaming attics and crawl spaces, sometimes that really can create some unintended air quality effects.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's definitely gonna be a growing concern, I guess, or something that's gonna be more and more talked about as we go, but it's gonna be slow. Like it's
I
state
mean,
by state, so when it's state by state, it's definitely gonna be slow.
even carbon dioxide, which we all exhale, right? Detectors around carbon dioxide are growing. And we talked to someone last week, a company that made some CO2 detectors. And you can take a conference room and you keep the door shut if you have 15 people in there. In a little over an hour, the level of carbon dioxide exceeds healthy levels for people to occupy, right? If you don't have air circulation happening with a supply and return in that room to get, spread that around the building. And that's something we don't think about. And even a bedroom, you sleep in a bedroom overnight, if the air is pretty static in there overnight, the carbon dioxide levels will just keep increasing. So I think there'll be
Oh,
more, because you don't realize that, or indoor gas ranges and things like that aren't properly vented, right? Critical thinking and brain function decreases as these, CO and CO2 are in the air and you don't realize it's there.
yeah, that's very interesting. That makes me think of when I was in college, sitting in those basement classrooms for an hour, sometimes, a 5 to 7:30 class. Like the air quality must have been terrible after that 2.5 hour class with just like 30 people in a small room.
It makes you think about a lot of things like that, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of times where we've been places where, by the time we left that area, the carbon dioxide level is probably pretty high.
yeah, that's wild. I'm gonna be thinking about that all this time now. But awesome, Ben. Thank you. This has been great. I appreciate you being so open about the real world side of it. The customer psychology, the challenges, and where you're thinking of taking AirGuard. Super interesting stuff. But before we close out, where should people connect with you or reach you? Any website or LinkedIn you're most active on?
Our HVAC company, BlueRidgeHeatingAir.com. It's not heating and air, it's heating air. And then AirGuard, AirGuard.pro is our website for that. And then both companies reference each other. So and my email is ben@airguard.pro. You can reach me easily that way. But yeah,
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. I will link that below so people can find you. But for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to The Intelligent Builder. If you found this episode valuable, share with another builder or operator in your circle, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Ben.
thank you, Owen.